Okay, here we go. I set P up for this hand. I gave out of position this limp calling range after I raised from the big blind, and I gave myself this range, about 30% of hands that I would raise when the small blind completes. I ran PO. I looked at bets of 40 and 70% with a 2.3x raise on every turn, on every street, just to keep it simpler, since my basic question was, did I play this hand correctly? And the options to shove I wanted to have for both villain and myself. That being said, let's get into it. I've solved it and it looks good so far. I want to get feedback on that. Based on the flop of 10 of diamonds, 10 of spades, 8 of spades, 8 of diamonds. I looked at the range advantage, and I have range advantage. I believe my equity is 53%, and the small blinds is 46%. If I look at the strategy for the small blind, the small blind's checking over half the time and preferring a small bet, which makes sense. That's what I would expect. And he's betting mostly for value. Looks like some hands are bet that are just kind of give up, bet and give up. Top pair is a bet, overcards. But I wanted to look at my decision. So he checks, and I wanted to look whether I made the correct play by betting, continuation betting with Jack 10 off. I look here in Jack 10 off, especially with the Jack of spades, which I have as a bet, which is a key thing I want to remember, that probably a check behind would be better with top pair if I didn't have the spade. I had assumed I would have bet all my Jack 10s here. So in any case, I could have checked behind as well, but betting wasn't bad, especially with the spade. So I bet 10. It seems like PO does prefer that small sizing when given the choices pretty clearly. And then how do I respond to the raise? So to look at the raises, I gave the villain the option to raise the 2.3x, which is close to what he actually did, or shove. It prefers the raise. And I do know villain's hand was queen 10, which was interesting because he played appropriately as well with queen 10 to raise. And I won't look at that too much at a time. Let's look at the equity. At this point, I still have equity over the villain, and he raises to 23. And I wanted to see if I made the correct call. And Jack 10 is a clear call here. I can look. Yeah, so I'm if I square size proportionally, I'm getting there a good portion of time with my Jack of spades. The half of the time I do c bet, I call pretty much all the time. So that looks good. I also wanted to see what happens when the Queen of Hearts hits. So the turn came, the Queen of Hearts hit. Let's see how that does on his range versus mine. So I did the runouts, and if I look at my in position equity, a queen is not the best card for me, but not a bad card. It looks like there's really no terrible cards for me, but most of them are these middling cards that help complete those straights. Spades are not good for me, which makes sense. But since our ranges are pretty wide as far as flushes and draws equally, I would assume that wouldn't be too big of a deal. It looks like the equities just don't move too much. Probably the worst card in the deck for me is a jack and a 9, which makes sense. What's interesting is a jack's terrible for my range, but pretty good for my hand, although it does open up those straight possibilities. So as far as in position EV, the queen is, these EVs pretty much look about the same as the equities, which implies there's no, everybody's realizing, both small blind and big blind are realizing their equity about the same, regardless of the cards that come out on the turn. So anyway, back to my point, what I want to see, what I do if he shoves. So villain shoves here. It prefers a bet actually, but villain shoves, and you can see the handy hatty is a shove as well, which is interesting. So this guy played pretty much Pio against me, which I wouldn't have expected in this tournament, but there you go. And as far as my hand of Jack 10, it is a fold, unless I don't block the flushes, it looks like. And even then, it's mostly a fold. So I folded. I'm going to run this again with ICM next and see if there's a difference if I put in the ICM information into Pio and see if it adjusts strategy.